Hello, and thank you for joining me today. We are going to be discussing initiatives and referendums in the state of Arizona and what exactly they are, their kind of pros, cons, the similarities, differences, and the reason why they exist. So, before we really dive into the subject, we got to look at some background information. When the Arizona state constitution was being written, it was heavily influenced by the progressive movement. This movement wanted to make sure that corruption was combated for the citizens of Arizona. So at the time, these major railroad corporations would come in, influence elections, they would quote unquote buy politicians, and this would leave the citizens more or less unable to do anything. So the writers of the Constitution of Arizona put in certain tools to help protect the citizens of Arizona. Now you might be asking what the tools are. The first tool we are going to cover are initiatives. They are a direct way for voters to propose new laws or change existing laws by gathering signatures through petitions. Once enough registered voters have signed the petition, the new law or change is placed on the next upcoming ballot. The pros to initiatives are that it allows citizens' voices to be heard, it gives power to citizens in the case of a corrupt legislation, allow citizens to decide on direct changes to the Constitution of Arizona, and anyone can submit an initiative. The cons are that it requires citizens to follow guidelines set by the state, smaller movements may not be able to garner the amount of signatures needed, physical forms must be used to attain signatures, and, again, anyone can submit an initiative. Next up are referendums. They're a direct way for voters to veto or remove parts of an already existing law. This is done by gathering signatures or registered voters in order to place it on an upcoming ballot. Now, the pros to a referendum is that, once again, allows citizens' voices to be heard. It gives power to citizens in the case of a corrupt legislation. Allows citizens to veto a law or change parts of a legislation they may not agree with. And anyone can submit a referendum. Cons. It requires citizens to follow guidelines set by the state. Once again, smaller movements may not be able to garner the amount of signatures needed. Physical forms must be used to attain signatures, and anyone can submit a referendum. Our third tool is recalls. They are a direct way for voters to remove a public official from power. This is done by gathering signatures of registered voters in order to place it on an upcoming ballot. And for non-elected officials, 6 months must pass before they can be recalled. And for elected officials, they can be recalled after 5 days. Now, you might be asking, how exactly do we use these three tools? And the process is the same for each. You first, step one, must find a sponsor, you create your own through the state's web services, or appoint an existing political committee to be the petition sponsor. You file an application. Through the Secretary of State's Office of Arizona, you must submit an application for a serial number. You acquire the appropriate petition. Once again, through the Secretary of State's office, you receive the correct in-person petition form based on the action you are taking. 4. You check your registration. Ensure that any paid or out-of-state circulators have registered with the Secretary of State's office. 5. You collect signatures, circulate your petitions, and obtain signatures from eligible voters. 6. You submit your petitions to the Secretary of State's office by the given deadline. And 7. You proceed by the state. The Secretary of State and County Records processes your petitions and determines whether or not enough signatures were obtained to be placed on the ballot. Now you might be asking, what exactly is the difference between an initiative and a referendum? They both sounded very similar. But we're going to look at the differences first. So initiatives are used to introduce new legislation and constitutional amendment. The petitions must be filed for this year by July 2nd, 2026. Constitutional amendments for this year require 383,923 signatures. And statutory initiative measures require 255,949 signatures. Referendums are used to veto new legislation or strike down parts of a legislation. Petitions for referendums must be submitted 90 days after the legislature adjourns, and they require 123,975 signatures for referendum petitions. The similarities are that both are tools used by the citizens of Arizona to interact directly with legislation. Both follow the same creation process involving getting a sponsor, contacting the Secretary of State offices, and the process of circulating the petitions they receive. They both allow citizens to participate in a form of direct democracy, which is being able to vote directly on legislation and giving them the ability to supersede their representatives and propose a change in legislation. Now you might be asking, what is a direct democracy? A direct democracy is a form of democracy that allows individual citizens to vote on policies and laws without the need of an elected official. This harkens back to the progressive movement's idea of being able to give the citizens a tool, a way to fight back against corruption within the legislation if the elected officials stopped listening to the voters and began to pass laws that were in the interests of larger corporations or organizations that don't represent all of the citizens of Arizona and are being bought or paid for. Thank you for your time. I hope you have a wonderful day. And if